So welcome everybody to the first of our five-part certification pathway series. This used to be one event that would be crammed into an hour, but unfortunately would never let us dive into the specifics for any of the particular certifications or really have a bigger discussion, as to how to get ready and what you would need to do. So what we've done is we've broken that out. Today is going to be simply an introduction to what certifications are and how to go, kind of the process involved across the board. And then we're going to skip a week. And then the following 4 weeks are going to be diving into specific programs as we go through. So I know there's a number of you that signed up for all of them, but you can go back through to the main registration page and sign up for others if you decide you want to dive into any or all of them. But we will make sure that we're going to cover at least the basics today, and we'll get into details on all of them through the upcoming weeks. So to start, again, just welcome everybody. My name is Brett Smith. I'm the director of the Small Business Development Center here at Lehigh University. I've been with the SBDC for 10 years now. And when I started, probably the first 3-4 years that I was here, I was working with our Procurement Technical Assistance Center, or PTAC, working with businesses on certifications and government contracting in particular. So I've worked with clients on I think every one of the certifications that we're going to talk about in this series. And I think I've helped clients get at least one client get all of the certifications, each one of the certifications. So we'll be able to talk in detail about your questions, how you can benefit from them, when they may or may not be appropriate for you as a business owner. And we'll go through all of that throughout this series. Going to do just a quick overview about the SBDC for those who are not familiar. We are in our 44th year of serving the community. We are funded through the U.S. Small Business Administration and the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development. And so that allows us to provide no-cost confidential one-on-one services to you as current or future business owners that are looking to grow your business. And we cover everywhere. We typically have a reputation of being the startup people or the business plan people, but really we have expertise and resources to guide you at every stage of your business, from idea all the way to exit. So, this kind of falls in that middle state, in one of those middle stages, as we talk about certifications as you look to grow your business. So we are here, again, at every stage of your business to provide that assistance. The SBDC network is a nationwide program. There are almost 1,000 SBDCs across the United States, and there are 15 here in Pennsylvania. This map is going to be a little outdated as of the beginning of next year, in that the Lehigh SBDC specifically, we cover Lehigh and Northampton counties, and we will also be covering the entirety of Bucks County, with our friends at Temple covering Montgomery County starting in 2025. So no matter where you join the SBDC from, I'm assuming most of you are from Pennsylvania, but if we have some from out there that are not in Pennsylvania, we can connect you with your local SBDC. And even if you come through us, we're happy to work with you, or we can refer you to the one that is closest to you. Again, all of our services are available through all of our colleagues across the state. Some housekeeping, always the most popular questions for any webinar. It is being recorded, and the recording and slides will be sent to you after the webinar, probably this afternoon, worst case tomorrow. But you will get those. And again, same with all of the upcoming sessions. We will be doing the same for those. So if you want to attend all of them but can only make 2 or 3 live, don't worry, you'll be able to access all of the recordings from the main lobby page. The chat is disabled, but there is a Q&A box. So if you do have questions, please use that Q&A box. I believe for the attendees, if you look at the bottom of your screen, it may be at the top. I'm not sure, but there is a Q&A box. If you ask questions throughout, I will do my best to answer them as we go. If it's something that's maybe not relevant to what I'm talking about at that moment, but we'll get to, or was something we talked about earlier, I'll make sure we wrap up with those at the end. So I will do my best to make sure we get to all the questions beforehand. The webinar probably will not take the whole time, the whole hour. We may get close, but I like to leave some time for questions, and just, again, in case things go over or I get talking too much, we can make sure that we're not going over for anybody. So please use the Q&A box, and otherwise the recording will be sent to you afterwards. All right. So what are we actually going to talk about today? So first, like I said, today is an overview and introduction. We're going to talk about kind of what small business certifications are, what the benefits of certification can be for you as a business owner, general eligibility requirements that are going to pretty much apply across the board. There may be some differences, and there's going to obviously be specifics to each one, but there are some things that are common across all of them. What the application process looks like, and some resources and next steps that you can use. So firstly, what are small business certifications? So when we talk certifications in this world, we're not talking about industry specific ones. We're not talking about ServSafe certification if you're a restaurant. We're not talking about Microsoft certifications for IT. We're not talking about ISO certifications for manufacturers. These certification programs are specifically for trying to do business with the government, so either federal government, state government, local government, or you're trying to do business with large corporate entities like your Walmarts, your Staples, Crayola Air Products, any of those big companies that you may be looking to work with. They're typically going to have supplier diversity programs. And these programs were created, one, to promote diversity and inclusion in business, but also primarily to level the playing field for small businesses. Typically, if you're trying to, we'll focus on the federal government for this example, but say you sell office supplies, you're a small business, you sell office supplies, you're trying to, you see a government agency has a contract available, and you're trying to go in and you say, okay, I can sell you, I can sell you a crate of pens for, whatever. A company like Staples or Walmart or somebody's always going to be able to come in and underbid you because they have that volume, they have that capacity to do that. And so if that was the case, if the playing field was just open like that, it would be almost impossible for small businesses to compete. And so what the federal government started doing a number of, probably 30 plus years ago, 40 years ago, and has been expanded to, state governments, local governments, as well as corporations, is, using these certification programs and set aside contracts, which we'll talk about, to help level that playing field. So that way you're only competing against other small businesses or other women-owned businesses or other minority-owned businesses. So that way, it's still going to be a competition. Again, you still have to be able to compete on price and capacity and capability, but it's going to be a much more level playing field than trying to compete, with Boeing or Walmart or Staples or, any of these kind of larger companies. And so these are the types of certifications that we're going to be talking about. So they're kind of lumped into three buckets. They kind of, some of them overlap, but you're typically going to have federal certifications, which are managed by the federal government. So you have, there's a federal women-owned program. There's a veteran-owned certification, HubZone 8A. There's also state and local certifications. So Pennsylvania has its own program for certifications, which we will talk about in one of the later sessions. And some local governments, typically not, in our territory, county in Pennsylvania, typically counties can't have their own programs. But I know, for example, the city of Philadelphia has a program. I believe the city of Pittsburgh does as well. Cities are able to have programs, but the counties and other local governments have to have some more restrictions on what they can do for small business. And there's also specialty certifications that may not be covered by one of those. For example, there's a disability-owned certification, LGBTQ plus certification. I think there's an Asian American, Hispanic American certification out there. So they're ones that don't necessarily may not be covered by one of those other programs, but there are still other certifications out there. So why are certifications important, and why we do have a lot of clients that come in and ask about them, and they do have a lot of potential value. They provide access to opportunities, so it can give you the opportunity to bid on government contracts that you might not otherwise be able to bid on because they might be set aside for small business or minority-owned business or women-owned business. And if you don't have that certification, you wouldn't necessarily be able to compete for that. Additionally, corporate supplier diversity programs. So I know, for example, PP&L here, which is a utility here in the Lehigh Valley, they have a supplier diversity program that they look, for certified small businesses to join. Even, our host, Lehigh University, also recently launched a supplier diversity program this year. And again, they're looking, that's a way that they can make sure that they are doing business with truly small businesses, truly women-owned businesses, because this is an area that can be open to a lot of fraud. So that's typically why certifications come into play. They do give you, we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but they can give you a competitive advantage in the marketplace, that you have a certification, that you are, that you can certify that you are women, veteran owned, minority owned. Um, Many of them act like, some of the third party ones act like chambers of commerce almost, in that they have networking and partnership events. So I can say, for example, the Women's Business Enterprise Center down in Philadelphia, which does one of the women-owned certifications. They have networking events throughout the year. They'll have doing business with, certain companies throughout the year. All different kinds of things that you wouldn't be able to access if you weren't part of that organization. And similarly, many of them do have training and mentorship programs to help build you as a business owner, and help maximize the use of your certification throughout. So this is just a quick overview. I'm not going to go over these individually, but you have these are the different certification programs that are out there. Again, we're going to talk about these all throughout the rest of the series. These are not all of them. Well, these are all the ones we're going to talk about. There are other certifications out there, which if you do have specific questions about one, you can certainly send me a note or ask a question in the Q&A box. But you can, these are typically the ones that, when we're talking about certifications with clients, we're looking at which are the ones that are going to create the most, have the most applicability for our clients in terms of what their target market is. And again, if you have questions, please feel free to use the Q&A box, so that way I can make sure I see them and get to them throughout. So I don't think the chat box is working. Okay. Some of the benefits of certifications, I talked about this a little bit, alluded to set aside contracts. So the federal government for sure, Pennsylvania does, and corporations will to an extent, is set aside specific purchases for small businesses and for certified businesses. And so you can only compete for that contract if you have that certification. So again, having the certification is helpful because then you can bid for that opportunity, and and make sure that you're able to participate. Small business, sometimes you can do without, typically do without a certification, but if you're looking especially at women, minority, veteran owned, anything like that, you're typically going to need a certification to do that. Additionally, for subcontracting opportunities, contracting and doing business with large entities is very difficult for small businesses to crack into. Getting that first contract is always very hard, and especially getting a prime contract where the entity is contracting directly with you is also incredibly difficult. Not that it can't be done, but it does take a while. So what we usually tell most of our clients is it's going to be a lot more likely to get an opportunity through a subcontracting opportunity. So what will happen, I know, for example, PPL for a fact that they will give, say, a prime, they will give a direct contract for landscaping, tree trimming, things like that, to make sure that the wires and poles are clear, for the power lines. They'll give one contract to a large tree trimming company. But what will happen is that company can't do all of the work necessarily. So what they will do is they will subcontract out part of that, to businesses, and PPL may require them to do so much of that with small businesses. So it's a way to get in. You won't necessarily be doing business with PPL specifically, but it's a way that you can still get into that market and gain the experience that you need to hopefully go for prime contracts yourself at some point. There's marketing advantages. Again, you'll get listed in a number of directories. So, for example, there's a federal directory of all federally certified small businesses. The other entities will all have databases of their own certified businesses as well. So it's a way to, again, make sure that you're in front of where you need to be. You can also many times use those certification logos in your marketing materials. That varies by program, but typically you're allowed to use something for all of them. And again, you get access to specialized programs and events that you wouldn't get if you didn't have these particular certifications. So getting into the general eligibility criteria, like I said, these are going to typically be across the board, but they all have something unique with all of them, which we will talk about in the upcoming weeks. Ownership is probably one of the more straightforward eligibility requirements, in that the company needs to be at least 51% owned by eligible individuals. So that means if you're a woman going for the woman-owned certification, the company needs to be at least 51% owned by one or more women. So it can be as many people as long as the total equals 51%. So for example, if you're a 3-person LLC, at least 2 of the 3 members have to be, have to be women or whatever other certification you're looking to obtain. The other piece that usually causes most of the concerns with eligibility is control. So not only just ownership, but eligible individuals also have to manage and control the daily operations of the company. So what that means is who's signing checks, who's negotiating contracts, who's doing sales, who's managing the employees, who's running the company. Typically that all has to be done by eligible individuals. It doesn't mean one individual has to do everything, and it doesn't mean, only say women or veterans or minorities have to do every single task. It just means that there's very clear oversight and involvement in the company. So where you typically see a lot of issues with this are, for example, with husband and wife owned companies, where it might have been when they started the company, it was 51% the husband, 49% the wife. And when they decided they wanted to go for the women-owned certification, they switched it. So 51% the wife, 49% the husband. But the husband was still running the day-to-day of the company. And so even though it's women-owned, it's not woman-controlled. So that's what you're going to see a lot of, and that's a lot of why that control piece is in there, because it leads to a lot of potential fraud opportunities. Veterans, this happens a lot with as well, really with all of them. But you see there's a lot of cases where with veterans and women-owned companies, particularly husband-wife companies, where there's control issues. So they're going to look and see, who is truly in control of the company. For size standards, typically it's going to go by the SBA small business size standards, which most businesses will qualify for. So typically for a service-based business, you're looking at about $15 million or less in average annual revenue. For a manufacturing, production, construction-based business, you're looking at 500 employees or less. So again, the vast majority of businesses are going to fall under that. Private companies may have a different standard. Pennsylvania's standard is a little bit different, which we will talk about during that session. But typically it's going to be the SBA size standards. And I will make sure that's a link to the small business size tool, so you can see for your particular business what your qualifications are. Citizenship, typically the owners have to be U.S. citizens. That's pretty common across the board. I think all of them require that. There may be some that allow legal permanent residence, but I believe they all have to be U.S. citizens. And generally for all certifications, you're going to need to have good character, in the sense that, the business doesn't have any judgments. There's no outstanding criminal cases. There's no outstanding lawsuits against the company, anything like that. No pending bankruptcy. The business has to be active and in good standing, which typically means you're paying taxes, you're keeping your registration up to date, all of that. Again, each certification is going to have different qualifications of what that means, but those are you're typically going to see some questions related to that in all of them. And then some other things that you may need to pay attention to are personal net worth limits. So there's some that are economic based, so you have to have a net worth of X or less. So you'll need to pay attention to that for some of them. Some have a physical location requirement, which is primarily HubZone. And some of them may only be open to specific industries. For example, we'll talk about in the women-owned, for the federal one, typically the set-asides only apply to specific industries, which we will go into more detail during that session. So that kind of goes over a little bit of the eligibility. The one thing I do want to talk about briefly before we get into kind of what the application process looks like is one of the things that we do here at the center is, if you're looking for assistance with a certification, before we even get into the application, we want to look at a couple of things. We want to look at, one, why are you looking for a certification? You don't, as I alluded to earlier, you don't need to have a certification to be able to say you're woman-owned, minority-owned, veteran-owned. You can say that. You are. You can say that. The difference is, if you're looking specifically to bid on contracts, then you may need it, to be able to prove that you are for that particular entity. But, it's not something you can't, you can say you're a woman-owned company anyway. We also try to figure out, because some of these do have costs associated with them, which we'll talk about. But we try and find, what's going to give you the best opportunity, to maximize your impact. Because, for example, say you're, say you're a Black woman who's also a veteran. You don't necessarily need to have all three certifications, depending on what it is that you're looking, what market you're looking to target, what kind of contracts you're looking to go after. You may only need one, so it can save you some money. And there might be a free, for example, the veteran one is free. So if in that case, instead of getting all three certifications, you may be able to be more effective with just one. And additionally, it matters, how you plan to take advantage of the certification. It's not always going to be, certifications are not a magic wand. We have clients that, sometimes will think that, they get a certification and a contractor is going to call and say, hey, I have 3 contracts. How many would you like? That's typically not how the process is going to work. So we want to make sure that you have your expectations are managed as to how, it's really just an additional marketing tool at that point. It does give you a leg up, it gets you in the door, but it's not going to guarantee anything as part of that. So you still need to make sure you have a good marketing strategy as part of that. So talking a little bit about the application process, what you're going to see, go through this. There's kind of a few steps. Self-evaluation. You're going to look at, are you set up to be an eligible business? Do you have the proper ownership structure? Do you have proper control of the company? Do you need to make those adjustments ahead of time? Doing them the day before you apply is not generally going to be helpful. But if you're planning, kind of a ways out, even at your early stages of your business, you realize, what, maybe we should restructure it. Maybe you say it is a husband and wife company and you say, what, we do really want to pursue women-owned contracts. That was kind of the intent. Let's change the structure. Make sure you have enough lead time to prove that. Not there's necessarily a set amount of time that's required, but make sure that you're able to prove that, you didn't just change everything just for the sake of the certification, that you can show that, the eligible individuals are truly in control of the company and that they have the ownership. You're going to want to do a financial review to make sure that your business is ready. To make sure that your business is ready to do this kind of work. It is different than what you may find in in normal B2B work. You're going to have to, you're typically not going to get paid until after you've done, the work, or, there may be delays even in that. So you want to make sure from your personal business finances, that's something that you can handle. Secure extra financing if you need to. And, just make sure that you're ready to make those steps at that point. Legal considerations, so making sure that any of the regulations that you're going to come across. So again, making sure that you don't have any outstanding judgments, lawsuits, anything like that going on. That you're able to qualify with everything, and and then again, feel free to seek professional consultation. We are here to help with that. There are other resource partners around that can help with that as well. We're certainly not the only ones. So make sure you use the resources that you have at your disposal. So what you're going to want to do in this process, again, you're looking at, I typically from the starting point where you think you want to apply for a certification, or where you decide you want to apply for a certification, to actually receiving the certification, you're probably looking at a period of 3 to 6 months. And that's pretty common. You may be able to get a certification in less time, but for any of the formal ones where they're doing a review of any of your documentation, you're looking at most commonly 3 to 6 months. So if you're kind of looking at a contract now that you want to bid on, it's probably going to be too late to get that certification before the contract is due or the proposal is due. But as you're looking to grow your business, as you're looking to determine how you want to enter these markets, understand that is going to take some time. So this is not something that's going to happen overnight. So as part of this, make sure that you're looking for kind of all of your business documents, kind of all the things from when you started your company that you may or may not have looked at since. Your articles of incorporation, your operating agreement for your LLC, making sure any business license or registrations that you need to have are there, org charts, tax returns, financial statements, pretty much any sort of business document that you have, make sure you're able to easily access it because somebody's going to need it. Not every certification will require every document, but somebody's going to require it. So it's easier to have them all. For example, if you're a corporation, you're going to need your stock ledgers and copies of your stock certificates and things like that. So it's a lot of, some of them are going to be common that you'll have for most things, but there's going to be some that are a little bit out there that you are probably buried in a drawer somewhere or in a, file deep in your computer. So it's good to get kind of organize all of those, which is, again, just a helpful thing for your business anyway, but especially as you're going through this to make sure you have everything that you're going to need. Also, again, kind of expectations management for what the process is. again, timelines are going to be 3 to 6 months between by the time you gather everything, go through the application. Ultimately, as part of their review, they're going to have questions. I've never had a certification, a formal one, go through without having some kind of question come back. They're always looking for something. That's their job. So even if you have what you think is a bulletproof, application, they're going to find something. So it doesn't matter how hard you try, they will. So, which is a good thing. I mean, it shows they're doing their job. Typically, if you do have a really good package put together, it's going to be, kind of just, oh, you forgot that document, or they just need more clarification on what something means. It's rare that they're gonna, if you have, if you've worked with somebody or you've at least, walked through the steps, put everything together, they're usually pretty painless process, but they're always gonna have questions. So to understand that, that's going to play into it. Typically, they're going to also have, I know for some of the third-party ones, they meet in committees to kind of review applications. Sometimes they do site visits. So to factor that all in, it just kind of depends on where you fall in their schedule. So, if they kind of do them every, it's like, okay, they do site visits the third week of the month and you apply in week 4, it's going to be a couple weeks before they get to you, kind of thing. So just understanding that as you're going through the timeline, that, this is a process that's going to take a little bit. And also making sure that you register in any necessary databases, which will be part of that. So for example, for some of the federal ones, you're going to need to register in SAM, which is the System for Award Management, which is where you go to register as a federal contractor. But they're each going to have their own kind of, place where you need to do that. And again, just a shout out for the Q&A box. I don't see any questions yet. So if you're trying to ask a question, there is a Q&A box, I believe at the bottom of your screen, maybe at the top. Feel free to click that, ask a question if you have any. If not, then we're good. But just want to make sure if anybody's trying to answer a question that they can, or ask a question that they can. Some tips as you're going through it, make sure you're double checking all the information because like I said, they're looking to find something that they want to question you on. So just make sure that, everything you're submitting matches. So if you're submitting, for example, to demonstrate that you have control, they may say, okay, submit checks. So you want to make sure that the checks you're submitting are signed by the eligible individual, not by anybody else. So those kind of things, just making sure, double checking what you're submitting, making sure you're providing everything they ask for. If you don't have something that they're asking for, you're typically going to need like a letter of explanation to attach as to why you don't have that. Sometimes you can get away with that, sometimes not. Making sure everything's organized, and if they ask you to label things particularly, you do that. And most simply follow the instructions. They do, again, they have their processes. That's what they do. So you kind of have to, do it their way in order to be successful. And again, the more that you follow their guidelines and do everything they ask, the much smoother your process is going to be. So typically what we see, from application challenges that we get from clients, again, we will usually, when I would do this, I would always kind of look through everything. I would ask clients to send me their stuff ahead of time and kind of look for the potential red flags. And these are kind of the things that you're going to see. You're going to see missing or outdated forms. So, one of the things, for example, if you're a corporation, they're going to ask for your last, board of directors meeting. A lot of, especially if you're a one-person corporation or, it's something you may have done it once 5 years ago and haven't done it since. So you want to make sure that those things are all up to date, making sure, everything is complete. Ownership and control issues is going to probably be one of the more common ones to make sure that, again, who truly has control of the company. Is the ownership, based on the, on the bylaws or the operating agreement, is it true? Is that person or people truly in control of the company? That's going to be typically the most common challenges you're going to find are ownership and control. Financial discrepancies, again, especially if there's net worth requirements or other kinds of financial requirements that, those are all consistent, that you have updated financials. And again, any kind of compliance issues are going to, if any of that pops up, will certainly be an issue. We don't have too many of those that come through. It's again typically going to be either incomplete documentation or ownership and control. Right. So some of the other resources that are available to you, we have a couple more slides after this, but some resources that are available to you. Certainly here at the SBDC, we can help you with that process. So where our role comes in is we're not able to submit the application for you. We can't fill out the application for you, but we can certainly look at documents. We can answer questions, kind of talk through the process, and work with you on that. The SBA does have, and I will make sure that that's a link as well. The SBA itself also has resources available to you to help from some of the more federal side of the certifications. Forgot to change this, but they're not called Procurement Technical Assistance Centers anymore. They're called Apex Accelerators, but they're like the SBDC, but they specifically focus on government contracting. So they are another resource you can use. And then I will have the size standards tool and the NAICS code lookup in case you're not sure, based on your business size, if you qualify, or what your NAICS codes are. Those are your industry codes that will kind of determine where you fall in, will help qualify you for these programs. So I will make sure there are links there when I send out the slides later today. So some of the next steps, again, making sure you can kind of look at the overview slide that I had with all the certifications listed, kind of see which ones might be relevant to you, which ones align with your business goals, kind of see where it is that you might want to go. And again, we'll talk about all those certifications as we go through the rest of the upcoming weeks. Develop an action plan. So I will actually send along with the slides a template for developing an action plan to kind of walk you through what you should consider, and also help you set a timeline. Because like I said, again, you're looking 3 to 6 months easily for many of these. Again, attend our upcoming webinars. The schedule will be coming up on the next slide. And certainly contact us or any of your other advisors if you have further questions. For our upcoming sessions, like I said, next week we're skipping. I have quite a few things that day already, so we're going to skip and start again on the 29th. We'll be talking about the federal certifications that are out there, specifically self-certification, 8A, and the HubZone programs. On the 5th, we will be talking about women and minority-owned businesses. And I know that's election day, so like I said, if you're not able to attend, certainly we will have these on demand for you as well. On the 12th, we'll be talking veteran and service disabled veteran certifications. And on the 19th, we'll wrap it up with state and local certification. So we'll dive into Pennsylvania's program and how that works. And just, again, some general tips on how to leverage your certification to kind of wrap up what we've talked about for the other previous sessions. All right. So that is it. Like I said, I will get the recording and the slides out to you hopefully today. If not, it'll be tomorrow. I thank you all for attending. I don't see any questions in the Q&A, so either I overwhelmed everybody or I hopefully answered most of your questions as we went. I'm sure there'll be more detailed questions as we go through each of the individual programs, which is sort of the intent. I figured today would be a little lighter, just kind of giving you an idea of what's out there and what the process is like. And then we will dive into the specifics, so that way you can kind of pick and choose what it is that you're interested in. So I will leave it open for a couple of minutes, see if there's any questions that come through. But otherwise, thank you all for attending and stay tuned for more information coming from me again, either today or tomorrow. Thank you.